Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Kelly Palmer.
Good morning, I'm Kayla David.
Welcome to Be Well Live. Welcome to all of you who are joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those loyal viewers. We are happy to have you here. Kayla and I are part of the healing department at Family Service of Rhode Island, and we come together every other week here on Facebook, on YouTube, as part of our Be Well Live information series, where we discuss lots of different topics, mainly about how to cope with the COVID-19 crisis, but also we talk about general wellness topics as well. Family Service of Rhode Island is a behavioral health and social service agency, and we've been serving Rhode Island for over 125 years, and we offer a variety of services, including telehealth counseling.
So we will be joining together today and every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. For the past year, we've been focusing on topics related to how to cope with COVID-19. As we continue to move forward, we're going to incorporate, as Sarah was saying, general wellness topics, there we go, because we know that while the pandemic is not over, there's light at the end of the tunnel. With that in mind, we want to encourage as many people to tune in so that we can take a moment to share this with your friends or to start a watch party. Help us reach as many people as we can with this important information about wellness during COVID-19 and beyond. We know that now more than ever, it's important for us to be able to reach out if we're struggling or to help loved ones be able to connect with assistance if they're struggling.
So, Kayla, I think our topic today is timely, and I am happy to be talking about it because I think it is a topic that impacts many of us, but it often doesn't get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And I think in times of stress, especially, with what's been going on in the world recently, this is one of the first things to be impacted or interrupted.
Yeah, so that's right, Sarah. Today we are talking about sleep disturbance and ways we can improve our overall sleep hygiene. And you're so right. This often doesn't get a lot of attention. Sleep disturbance is difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, having nightmares or night terrors. And during the pandemic, we've seen a significant increase in sleep disturbance in the general population. So for more and more people, we're seeing an impact in their sleep in the last year.
For sure. And as I said, sleep is often the first thing to be impacted when we're experiencing stress or a trauma. And, we talk a lot about COVID-19 being this collective trauma that we're all experiencing. So it makes a lot of sense that people have been struggling with this. Mm-hmm. And when we have less sleep, right, that not only causes us to be fatigued, so feeling really tired, but it also impacts our overall mood, the way in which we are able to regulate our emotions, right? It can have a big impact on our problem-solving skills. And over time, if that lack of sleep becomes chronic, right, and if it's not treated or identified, sleep disturbance can impact our immune system and our overall physical health, right? Mm-hmm. So we see prolonged sleep disturbance can really impact your overall functioning and have negative impacts on your physical health.
Yeah. And today we will be discussing ways to support healthy sleep, but it's important to say again that so many people are struggling with sleep disturbance right now, myself included, and I believe Sarah included as well. And it's a really common symptom of toxic stress, of anxiety, and of depression, all of which have been heightened in the general population during the pandemic. So sleep is also the time that as a species, all of us are the most vulnerable. So, I think we need to put into context why it is that sleep disturbance is one of the first things that kind of shows up or appears when we're experiencing a significant amount of stress. It's because when our body is experiencing stress and our brains are experiencing stress, it's framed, especially right now during the pandemic, as something that we are fighting for, right? Fighting to survive. And so if sleep is when we're the most vulnerable, and if our brains are interpreting the virus as a potentially traumatic event that's life-threatening, then our body is going to respond with a certain set of tried and true survival mechanisms. One of those is increasing our cortisol and adrenaline. So that's our stress hormones that allow us to kind of go into fight, flight, or freeze. So although those are our tried and true methods, and they work a good majority of the time to keep us safe and surviving, the virus is not something that we can fight in a literal sense, and it's not something we can outrun. So our body is producing these stress hormones, and our brain's survival response is activated, which can lead to difficulties with sleep along with other challenging symptoms. So we can see that body, some people say, like, I'm just feel like I'm running on a motor. I can't seem to fall asleep. For me, I'm sleeping what I feel like is much like shallow. I'm a very light sleeper now. So any sound is going to activate me and bring me kind of back out of sleep. Or we can see people waking up frequently and then having that rumination or that anxiety about the world, about work, about the next day. And that is, again, the body's response to saying, if we're trying to survive, sleep is when we're most vulnerable. So it's going to be something that's going to be impacted.
And I think oftentimes, Kayla, sleep disturbance is kind of normalized, right? In times of, in our society, in times of stress. And it's like the badge of a busy person of not getting enough sleep, or just, you have a lot to do, a lot on your mind. But if you've been experiencing sleep disturbance for some time, it is really important and a good idea to talk about it, right? It is not something that we should ignore, because as we said, it really can have an impact on your overall health, physical health, and overall emotional well-being. So we should not ignore it. So, connecting with your primary care doctor or a mental health provider is a really good place to start if you've noticed changes in your sleep patterns, or you haven't been able to, as you're saying, fall asleep or stay asleep. Without sleep, right, if our body doesn't get the sleep that we need, we become more vulnerable to developing other mental health or physical health problems, right? Or exacerbating perhaps a current mental health or physical health issue that we're already struggling with. We're also likely to be more irritable, which I think the members of my household could attest to in recent days for myself. We might have trouble empathizing with others, right? So our patience kind of goes out the window. And we might have a lot of difficulty focusing or completing or following through with tasks. And so all of those things, right, can disrupt our kind of typical way of being, or our typical kind of rhythms and routines. And I know that for me, I'm very sensitive to changes in my sleep patterns, right? If I get out of my rhythm and I don't get as much sleep as I need, it is very noticeable, not only to myself, but to those around me, right? So I have trouble paying attention. I also have difficulty multitasking, which is something that I'm usually pretty good at and, is required of me for the job that I do. So, and I become much more irritable. I think I said that. But sometimes we can get into patterns where we are not getting enough sleep. And like I said, we might either normalize it, or perhaps we might not realize it right away. So it's really important to pay attention to.
Yeah. And it's, again, like you were saying, Sarah, so many of us are not getting enough sleep because there's so much on our plates. Yes. Right. So the pandemic might have created times that you are providing much more caregiving than you would normally. So I'm thinking of those, those parents out there that were doing distance learning, right? And so you're doing so much more than maybe you were when kids were going to school, physically to school. We might be taking care of other loved ones who are sick, or we might be trying to take care of our community. Many of us, because of the pandemic, have seen such an increase in our workload. So there's so much more to do. And so all of those things, along with people who have had to take multiple jobs in order to support their families, the there's only so many hours in a day, and so we're many times people are trying to extend how many hours do I actually have to sleep versus how many hours do I have to be productive. And then there's this sense of, and I think it was the New York Times that had written about it, called like revenge bedtime, there we go, which is this idea that now that our lives are so, encompassed maybe by our work or in our homes, if you are working from home, or there's so much more to do, we are kind of responding to all these pandemic responsibilities. Part of what can happen is we don't want to go to sleep because we're trying to like take back some of our personal time or our pleasurable time. So then we're extending out. Okay, I don't want to go to sleep yet, even though I'm tired, because I want to watch this last TV show, or I want to read my book, or I feel like my time is not my own. So we can see that happening, which might be this kind of conscious or subconscious experience of reducing the amount of hours we're sleeping. And so it's just important to think about that there's so much going on for so many people. And so when our plates are really full, it's going to impact our sleep, maybe intentionally, because we're trying to get more and more out of the day. And then the more stress we have, the more likely we are to have to wake up in the middle of the night, to be kind of having that kind of constant turning of thoughts and emotions that might lead to us having a sleep disturbance.
For sure, Kayla, and I know that I'm guilty of that revenge bedtime, right? Of like claiming back my own time, and and part of me approaches that in like, well, this is self-care, right? I want time to myself, or I want to watch that last show. This is good for me. But I think it's so true to think about that, if those things, even if you're viewing them as a positive activity, are impacting your sleep, it can kind of catch up with you in not so good of a way in the long term.
Well, and it's that, Sarah, it goes back to, we've now as a culture begun to talk about self-care as so much more than taking care of the self, right? Taking care of the self is enough sleep. It's eating 3 healthy meals a day, or getting enough kind of nutrients. It's being hydrated. It's having movement. It's having our basic needs met, right? Above and beyond that, and I'm so guilty of this, like the TV watching, the bubble baths, the reading of the books, all of those things, the shopping late at night on my phone, all of those things are our cultural kind of perception of what self-care is. But really, if those are interrupting the sleep, they are not self-care. Because ultimately, sleep is going to be one of your priority self-care areas.
100%, Kayla. And it's like, you and I talk a lot about self-care, not only here in our segments for Be Well, but in our work, in our personal life. And, that analogy of like when you get on a plane and they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first, right before you do it for kids or others you're traveling with. Sleep is like oxygen, right? That's our oxygen mask. If we are not well rested and we don't get enough sleep, we're not going to be in a place to tackle the day, but also to really enjoy those activities or those hobbies that we want to engage in and get pleasure out of, right? So it's all kind of connected. So I love that idea, as you're kind of referencing, of getting back to the basics of self-care, and sleep is really one of those things, so that we can kind of meet the challenges in our lives, from the best place, but also those pleasurable things that we all want to engage in. It's so important to prioritize it.
And once we realize that it's important to prioritize our sleep, it's a good idea to understand what's making our sleep more difficult. And there's many things that are making our sleep more difficult. Some are within our control and some aren't. So we're going to talk about some of the things that might be within your control. One thing is blue lights. And it's a huge conversation. People have many feelings about blue lights. Blue lights are the lighting that's in our phones, our TVs, our gaming systems, our iPad screens. Now, blue lights are natural. We get them in our environment. Actually, when it's a really sunny day and we wake up to the sun in the morning, what kind of energizes us is the blue light. There's natural blue lights in our environment. However, blue light, naturally is made to stimulate us. It's not meant to help us fall asleep. it messes with our bodies. In all actuality, it messes with our body's ability to prepare the natural production of melatonin, which is our, some people take supplements for melatonin. However, melatonin is naturally produced in our bodies, and it's what makes us tired at the end of the day. It's what helps us lull us to sleep. Now, blue lights block the production of that. And I'm a total stickler for, or I like often read my Kindle in bed, or I read it on my phone, which is so much worse. And I'll often say to my partner, no, like that's not me. Like I'm fine. I get tired from reading my book on my phone, but it's actually not true, right? Okay, so one of the things that's in our control if we are experiencing sleep disturbance is cutting down the blue lights. What they say is ideal is 2 to 3 hours before bed, that we're not watching TV, we're not on our phones, we're not on our iPads, we're not on our gaming systems. That might not be feasible for a lot of us. I know for me, that would be very difficult. So if it's not possible to try shutting down at 2 to 3 hours, which it probably isn't for most people, even a half hour or an hour before bed, can be really, really substantial. So try things like playing board games, or I've now switched to like purchasing books from local bookstores and actually having physical books next to my bed versus reading them on my phone. Even taking a relaxing bath or a shower, trying anything you can to kind of cut down that screen time. And if you can't, putting your device into nighttime mode or dark mode so you can dim your brightness on your phone. Even those small changes will make a big difference in the amount of blue light you're receiving and what you're doing in terms of your brain, activating that, stimulating or that energy.
I love that, Kayla. And even just kind of like you're saying, using that dark mode or nighttime mode, that's like a really quick thing that you could do to change your habits at night. I think another thing that's particularly not necessarily unique to the last year, but I think that has become more common in the last year is that many of us are spending a lot more time at home, right? Some of us are working from home. If you're not working from home, you're probably, we've been spending a lot of time at home because of the pandemic. And what that can mean and has meant for me is that many of us are also like spending more time in bed, perhaps doing other things than sleeping. So like reading, watching TV, talking on the phone with family or friends, doing a Zoom call, being cozy in bed. Our beds are much more accessible to us, right? And for some, especially who are living in close quarters, right? Everybody's home. If you don't have kind of several rooms or a large living area, the bed's not a bad place to escape, right? From the rest of your family or whoever you may be living with. I know that my son back in last spring when he was doing distance learning, he was kind of like, well, can I do school from bed, Mom? Right? And our beds might be an appealing place to hang out, right? I know I try to make mine as cozy as possible, but doing too many things in our bed actually can confuse our brains, right? So when we're getting cozy in our bed, our brain is thinking it's time to sleep, right? But, if it's noon on a Saturday and you're reading your book in your bed, it might not be time for you to go to sleep at night. So what we can do to kind of make sure that our kind of brain isn't getting confused about that is that we can reduce that by reducing what you do in your bed, right? So avoid working from your bed, eating in your bed, or even watching TV in your bed, which it's one of my favorite things to do. And this is a tough one for so many. But, making your bed the place that is just for sleep does, biologically help your brain signal it that it's time to wind down and it's time to go to sleep. So if you have a healthy habit around that, it can really help to reduce the amount of time it takes your body to wind down and to fall asleep, right? It helps train your brain. So, and I know this has become much more common during the pandemic.
Well, it's that hard thing of we might be sleepy on a Saturday afternoon when we're not supposed to be going to sleep, but if we're doing a bunch of things all in our bed, then when we get to bed, right, to actually go to sleep, then it's like, oh, shouldn't I be doing my homework? Shouldn't
Right.
I be watching
Right.
TV? It can actually induce kind of those anxious feelings of if you're doing your work in your bed or your schoolwork in your bed then like signals to your brain, let's think about work and school, right? So it's like it is so tricky because our beds are so comfy, and maybe the comfiest place in the house. And like you were saying, the less space we have, it might be the only place. So again, this might not be within your control to change.
Right.
But if it is, it's worth looking at if that's something that you're doing and you're experiencing sleep disturbance.
For sure.
The next trick is try to do something relaxing before bed. So for me, I am especially in the winter, I love baths. It's just like sitting in warm water for me is like the ultimate form of relaxation. So I typically do that at night, and I try to utilize essential oils that might soothe. So you got your lavender scented kind of things. I always make a warm cup of chamomile tea every night. It's part of my kind of ritual to go to sleep, which chamomile is supposed to help kind of relax. So trying to figure out ways to bring relaxation into your kind of nighttime routine versus something that might be more stimulating. So, for me, it's chamomile tea. It's not green tea, right? Because green tea would be caffeinated and stimulating. Other people do kind of warm cups of milk to soothe them to sleep. Again, getting back to kind of the paperbacks, actual books versus kind of screen time. Even, getting like a massage or a nice rub, maybe we're having like our loved one give us kind of some hand rubs or a back rub that can help us kind of go to sleep. And even if you're not, don't have that, things like progressive muscle relaxation, which I think Sarah's going to speak to a little bit about, can be really helpful before sleep. And then the worst case scenario, I always was told this when I was younger, is read the most boring book. So I used to have like a science book by my bed because I couldn't get through a page without being tired, because it was like, okay, do I stay up and read this science book or do I go to sleep? So we can kind of, again, trick our brains that way of getting kind of bored, or that kind of lulls us to sleep.
And I think, Kayla, there are, that idea of having that rhythm, right? So we talked about kind of training our brains that our bed is a place, right, to sleep. Having that rhythm leading up to going to sleep and having that relaxing cue can also help train our brain, right, to say like, okay, we're moving into almost sleep time. So it's so important. There's also, in the age we are of technology, there's actually a lot of apps out there that are meant to help soothe us to sleep, or can kind of help aid in our relaxation, right? So there are things like sleep story apps, which tell soothing stories, and they're, told with people who have really calm voices. There's also a lot of research out there showing that meditation specifically for sleep can be really helpful for falling asleep. And you mentioned progressive muscle relaxation is a really effective technique to kind of relax our bodies. And for those of you who aren't aware of what that is it's something that you can do just on your own, and it has to do with tensing your muscles and then letting them go. Tensing, right? So if you're lying in bed waiting to get to sleep, you can start from kind of the top of your head and go down, or even from your toes, right? Tensing your toes and then kind of tensing your legs and letting go, and going all up through the muscles in your body, and feeling that difference between tense and relax can really help you engage with your body and relax. And there's also, you can get apps that help you with that too, that'll kind of walk you through that guided meditation. One good resource is the UCLA Mindfulness Awareness Research Center is a really great resource that offers free guided meditations, and they're both in English and Spanish. and they actually have one that's specifically designed for sleep. So if you're having difficulty getting to sleep, and you've kind of tried everything, maybe look for an app, right? So try something new. There's a lot out there that can help guide us, and it's not a one size fits all situation. So you might have to try a few different things to get you going. But having a guided meditation or those soothing sleep stories can really help relax people and get them prepped for sleep. So I encourage you to try that.
And I know we had someone kind of asking some questions in the comments, and we had shared some information from the Sleep Foundation. But one of the questions was resources for preteens or teens regarding blue lights and the effect on sleep. I think the biggest thing, we can certainly provide information, but a huge part of it is modeling.
Yes.
If you as a parent are in your bed on your phone, which many of us as adults are so, we do a lot, then that's modeling you using blue lights, right? So I think that if it's a culture in your family to shut the phones off or the screens off, an hour before bed, 2 hours before bed, and you're doing something together and you're starting that early, right? As a family, it becomes part of the family culture, right? And it's modeled from everyone in that family.
You could put your phones to sleep, right? So we're going to sleep, our phones are going to go to sleep. So maybe instead of charging your phone by your bed, right? My husband's always done this. He's a good model at this, right? His phone stays downstairs and is charged downstairs. So that's a really easy thing that you can do, and especially for teens, right? Have a charging station downstairs instead of in their room. And I bet you that'll get them out of bed pretty quickly in the morning because they'll want to run down and check their phone. But that's a really kind of easy fix that you can do for teens. But you have to be willing to do it also, Kayla. Yeah.
And people, I know a lot of people that have gone back to buying alarm clocks versus, their phones, to keep their phones away from them at bed. There are things like block phones that are out there that you can transfer all your calls to, and it's like your T9 texting phone. So you're back to your Nokias, right? That didn't have the blue lights, that you could really only call on. There are all of these things that people are trying to do to get further and further removed from that blue light, or from that kind of instant gratification that comes from kind of opening an app or opening your phone, that kind of ties us to it. So there's a lot out there. Well, I want to thank you, Sarah, and thank everyone that's watching, listening, and sharing our Facebook Lives. I think one of the biggest things is not to feel ashamed to reach out if we're struggling with sleep disturbance or other mental health challenges during the pandemic. It is so common right now, and it's really difficult. But as Sarah was saying at the beginning, it impacts so much more than just us feeling tired. And it's important to talk to our doctors, or to reach out to a therapist if we're struggling with mental health issues or challenges, or with sleep disturbance. And again, we look forward to talking to you in 2 Wednesdays to discuss another wellness-related topic. Be well and be safe.
Bye-bye.